A Roman emperor marched east with 70,000 men and vanished, captured, humiliated, forced to kneel before a Persian king. This isn't fiction, it really happened, and it nearly wiped out the entire Middle East. In 260 AD, the two greatest empires on Earth collided, and the fallout nearly destroyed the cradle of civilization. Rome, mighty but aging. Persia, rising and ruthless. At the center of this ancient clash stood Mesopotamia, the birthplace of writing, of cities, of empires. Whoever controlled it held the keys to the east. But this war wasn't just about land. It was about legacy, revenge, and survival. Rome had ruled for centuries. Its legions were feared. But deep within the Sassanid Empire, a new king had emerged. Shapur I, brilliant, brutal, and determined to crush Roman dominance. His ancestors, the Persians of old, had once ruled the world under Cyrus and Darius. Shapur wanted that glory back, and to get it, he would strike at Rome's eastern frontier, hard. In the years leading up to 260, Shapur launched raids across the border. Not small attacks, full-scale invasions. Cities like Antioch were pillaged, Roman governors were powerless, trade collapsed. Panic spread like wildfire across Syria and Asia Minor. Rome could no longer ignore it. Emperor Valerian, already in his 60s, decided to take command himself, a rare move for an emperor. He raised an army of over 70,000 men and marched east. Veterans, elite cavalry, engineers, archers, Rome's finest. He believed Roman order would be restored, that Shapur would be crushed, but he didn't know what was waiting for him. The Persians were ready. Shapur had learned from every Roman tactic. His army was fast, mobile, and vicious, with heavily armored cavalry, terrifying archers, and war elephants that shattered enemy lines. By the time Valerian reached the city of Edessa, everything had already begun to go wrong. Plague had broken out in the Roman camps. Thousands of soldiers were dying before a single battle had begun. Supplies were running low, and Shapur had laid siege to the city. Valerian refused to retreat. He was a Roman emperor. Retreat was humiliation. He chose to wait, hoping for reinforcements, hoping the plague would end, hoping he could somehow turn the tide. But Shapur had other plans. Knowing Rome was weak and desperate, Shapur offered terms, a negotiation, a peace meeting between kings. Valerian agreed. Dressed in full imperial armor, flanked by elite guards, the Emperor of Rome rode into the Persian camp under a flag of truce. It was a trap. The moment he arrived, Valerian was seized, shackled in chains, stripped of all dignity. For the first time in history, a Roman emperor had been captured alive by a foreign enemy. But Shapur didn't just imprison him, he humiliated him. According to Persian records and Roman shameful whispers, Valerian was used as a human stepping stool, forced to kneel so that Shapur could mount his horse. Over and over again. Stone carvings in modern-day Iran still show the moment, Shapur on horseback, towering over the kneeling emperor. For Rome, this wasn't just a defeat, it was a nightmare. Their emperor, the living symbol of their power, now a slave in enemy hands. Back at Edessa, chaos erupted. With their emperor gone and disease spreading like wildfire, the Roman army collapsed. Thousands were killed, thousands more surrendered. Edessa fell, and the gates of the east were wide open. Shapur's army pushed deeper into Roman territory, torching cities, enslaving entire populations, and wiping out what remained of Roman authority in Syria and Mesopotamia. Ancient cities that had stood for centuries, centers of learning, trade, culture, were reduced to ash. Mesopotamia bled. This wasn't just a military disaster, it was the cultural and spiritual gutting of an entire region. Rome was in shock. No one knew how to respond. With Valerian missing, generals declared their own emperors. Civil wars erupted back home. The empire began tearing itself apart, and Valerian? He never returned. Some say he died in chains. Others say his skin was flayed and stuffed, displayed in a Persian temple as a warning to future Roman rulers. One man, one decision, one battle. And everything changed. But from the ashes of that collapse, something unexpected began to rise. A queen. In the power vacuum left behind by Rome's humiliating defeat and the chaos that followed, a new figure emerged. Not from Rome, not from Persia, but from the heart of the East. Her name was Zenobia, and her rise would shake the ancient world to its foundations. Born in Palmyra, a wealthy trade city in the Syrian desert, Zenobia was no ordinary woman. She was brilliant, multilingual, a student of history, and a master of politics. Some claimed she was descended from Cleopatra herself, and she certainly carried the same fire. When her husband, the Roman-aligned ruler of Palmyra, was assassinated in the wake of Edessa, Zenobia didn't mourn quietly. She took power. Not as regent, not as a placeholder, as queen and commander. And she had a vision to build a new empire, one that honored the East, avenged its humiliation, and restored dignity after the catastrophe Rome had caused. While Rome burned in civil war and Persia basked in its victory, Zenobia moved swiftly. First, she secured Palmyra. Then she expanded. Her armies marched west and south, claiming Syria, Judea, Arabia, and even Egypt. Each conquest was swift, strategic, and stunning. What made her different from other rebels? She didn't just conquer, she ruled. Zenobia treated her new subjects with respect. She allowed religious freedom. She protected trade routes. She built schools, restored temples, minted coins with her face beside her son's, and in doing so carved herself into the legacy of Rome itself. But make no mistake, she wasn't Rome. She was something new, and the West was watching. Rome, still reeling from Valerian's disappearance, was now led by a new emperor, Aurelian, a hardened general, a soldier emperor, and a man with one goal: to reunite the empire. He crushed Germanic invaders in the north. He pacified the rebellious west. Then he turned east, toward Zenobia. She knew he was coming, but she didn't flinch. Zenobia raised one of the most disciplined, battle-hardened armies the East had seen in centuries. She allied with former Roman soldiers, Eastern mercenaries, and desert cavalry. She fortified her cities and prepared for war. And in 272 AD, the Roman legions met the Palmyrene army in battle. Two worlds collided once again, this time not Rome and Persia, but Rome, and the one who dared to replace it. At the Battle of Imai, Zenobia's forces struck first, using their famed cavalry to outflank the Roman infantry. The heat of the Syrian desert baked the battlefield. Dust storms blinded soldiers, and for a moment it seemed Zenobia might hold her ground. But Aurelian was patient. He baited her cavalry into overextending. Then he counterattacked. The Palmyrene army shattered under the Roman response. Thousands died, others fled. Zenobia retreated to the city of Edessa, and then finally, to her capital, Palmyra. Aurelian followed. Outside Palmyra's grand walls, the Roman emperor offered her a chance: surrender, and live. But Zenobia refused. Even when defeat was certain, even as Roman catapults battered the gates, she held on, not just for herself, but for the dream of an Eastern empire that could rival Rome. In a final act of courage, she tried to escape on horseback, hoping to reach the Persians for help. She was captured at the Euphrates River. Palmyra fell. And with it, the last true challenge to Roman dominance in the East. But Zenobia's story didn't end on the battlefield. Aurelian, both impressed and calculating, chose not to execute her. Instead, he brought her back to Rome, in chains, to parade through the streets in his triumph. Thousands of Romans lined the roads to witness the so-called Queen of the East, adorned in golden chains, walking behind Aurelian's chariot. But even in defeat, she held her head high, her pride, her dignity, and her legend unbroken. Some say she later lived in a Roman villa under house arrest. Others claim she became a philosopher, a symbol of power, intelligence, and grace, long after her empire had fallen. The war that began with Rome's collapse at Edessa had come full circle, first with Valerian's chains, then with Zenobia's. But through it all, Mesopotamia and the entire Eastern world would never be the same. Temples once sacred lay in ruins, cities burned, cultures collided. And yet, from the ashes, stories like Zenobia's emerged. Stories of resilience, rebellion, and the refusal to be forgotten. Rome survived, but it had been humbled. Persia triumphed, but its time would come. And Zenobia, she became a legend. A warrior, a mother, a queen, and perhaps the last best hope the East ever had to stand as Rome's equal. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, leave a comment, hit like, and subscribe for more powerful true tales from history.